In Lusaka, the bustling capital of Zambia, inside the golden-lit mansion of billionaire Chibwe Mwansa, a lavish party was about to unfold. Beneath Swarovski chandeliers and towering marble columns, the guest list boasted powerful figures. Ministers, ambassadors, CEOs of mining corporations, and key players from the political and media elite. Chibwe, a man in his early 50s with a polished bald head, sneered as he signed one last invitation. This one wasn't like the others. It was addressed to Zola, the young janitor who worked at his corporate headquarters. "Send it to her as an honored guest," he told his assistant, smirking. "Let the upper class have a little entertainment." The gold-embossed invitation was hand-delivered to Zola. She opened it, stunned by the capitalized text. "Honoring outstanding staff, you are cordially invited, Ms. Zola Mbu, as a guest of honor." Zola was a hard worker, but she never imagined receiving an invitation to such a luxurious event. Part of her wanted to decline, but the knowing glance of the mailroom guard and the half-smirk from the receptionist made it clear. This wasn't an honor. It was a setup. A cruel joke. The night of the party arrived. While guests waited eagerly for the evening's entertainment, no one expected the woman stepping out of the limo. Zola appeared in an emerald silk gown studded with gemstones, gliding with regal grace. Her makeup was flawless, her hair swept into an elegant updo, and her confident gaze brought the grand hall to complete silence. An older socialite whispered, "Who is that?" A diplomat mumbled, "Isn't that the janitor?" Chibwe nearly choked on his wine. He staggered slightly as Zola approached, her smile composed and fearless. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Mwansa," she said calmly. "What an incredible honor!" But the story didn't end there, because Zola didn't come just to enjoy the party. The morning before the gala, Zola awoke in her tiny, crumbling room on the outskirts of Lusaka. The ceiling leaked, the window creaked in the breeze, but to her, today felt entirely different. Before the sun had risen, she opened an old chest and carefully unwrapped a dress wrapped in white cloth, the only gown she owned, hand-sewn by a friend of her late mother. It was a deep emerald silk dress, adorned with beadwork crafted from gems mined from the very quarry her mother had once invested in. She sat at her small mirror, gently applying layers of moisturizer, pinning her hair up neatly the way her mother had taught her. She didn't dress to dazzle. She dressed to walk into a world that had once erased her, with dignity, with rightful pride. On her way to Chibwe's grand estate, Zola made one quiet stop, a small cemetery on the city's western edge. She knelt before a white gravestone etched with the words, "Wintam Mbu, Mother, Founder, Forgotten." She placed a single wildflower at the base. "I'll do what you couldn't," she whispered. As Zola entered the grand hall, the music faded, not in admiration, but in stunned, mocking disbelief. The girl who once mopped their office floors now stood among Lusaka's elite. "Oh goodness, isn't that the janitor from the 12th floor?" A woman gasped behind a laugh. "This has Chibwe's humor all over it," muttered a mining executive with a chuckle and a sip of wine. Zola walked on, shoulders back, chin high, her gaze as cold as polished glass. The emerald gown hugged her proud figure, its elegance clashing with the smug discomfort now spreading through the crowd. At the far end of the room, Chibwe watched with visible amusement. He raised his glass. "Zola, I must say, I'm surprised. I didn't think you'd actually show." Zola smiled, her British-accented voice calm and composed. "You invited me, Mr. Mwansa. I'm simply honoring the gesture." Soft laughter fluttered across the tables. A man leaned toward his wife, whispering, "She probably borrowed that dress. It's A little sad, really. Zola took her place at the guest of honor seat without waiting for permission. Her eyes swept the room, collecting every condescending stare like evidence in a trial. The speeches began. The MC launched into glowing words about Chibwe's visionary leadership and inspiring legacy. Polite applause followed. Then Zola stood. "May I say a few words?" The hall fell silent. Chibwe hesitated, then nodded, expecting a flattering tribute. Zola walked calmly to the stage, took the mic in her hand. "My name is Zola Mbu, daughter of Winta Mbu, co-founder of this company. My mother was betrayed, her assets stolen, and I was cast into this world with nothing but a mop in my hand." Gasps replaced whispers. Faces turned pale. "I'm not here to dine. I'm here to expose the truth. To remind you, justice always returns, no matter how late." She raised a USB stick into the air. "I carry proof. Letters. Original contracts. Recordings. All of it. Evidence of what Mr. Chibwe did." Chibwe's face drained of color. He hissed to his aide, "Stop her." But it was too late. The MC took the USB. The screen behind the stage flickered to life, and what it displayed shook the entire room. The giant screen lit up with old photographs. Young Winta Mbu standing beside Chibwe in a modest makeshift office during the early days of the company. They were signing the first foundational documents, Winta's eyes glowing with hope. Then came scanned legal records, papers clearly listing her as a co-founder, holding 40% of the company's shares. "Fake! All of that is fake!" Chibwe shouted, springing to his feet. "This is a cheap setup." Zola didn't flinch. She played an old recording, her mother's voice, trembling but resolute, from an interview long ago. "I trusted Chibwe. I gave him everything because I believed we shared a vision. But when the company went public, I was pushed out of the boardroom like an old chair." The crowd grew still. The mood in the room shifted, unease replacing amusement. An elderly man, a longtime shareholder, spoke up. "I remember her. This girl isn't lying." Chibwe pointed an accusatory finger at Zola, his voice rising. "Who are you to slander me in front of the entire elite of this country?" Zola raised her chin, her tear-filled eyes unwavering. "I'm the last person left to speak the truth. I am the daughter of the woman you betrayed, buried, and erased. But I did not forget." More evidence flashed on the screen. Forged signature contracts, falsified fingerprint documents, financial statements showing Winta's abrupt removal from the board, internal emails between Chibwe and his private lawyer discussing how to dispose of the originals. "Where did you get this? Who gave you the right?" Chibwe roared. "From those who once believed in you," Zola said coldly, "and who now want their hands clean." The atmosphere of the ballroom cracked like ice under pressure. The MC stood frozen. Several shareholders pulled out their phones, snapping pictures of the damning slides. Members of the press slipped through the crowd, recording every word, every image. Chibwe hurled his wine glass to the marble floor, shards of crystal scattering. "Get out! You have no right to do this." Zola stepped down from the podium, planting herself firmly in the middle of the hall. "I've spent the past year cleaning floors in the very building my mother helped build. You may erase records, but you can't erase memory, and you can't outrun justice." A heavy silence followed, long and sharp like a held breath. Then, applause. Soft at first, then growing. It came from an old woman in a traditional chitenge robe, the oldest shareholder present. "I stand with Zola," she declared. "We all deserve to hear the full story." The room remained heavy with silence after the elderly shareholder's declaration. Chibwe, his tie askew and his face flushed crimson, scanned the crowd for support. But the same eyes that once looked at him with flattery now looked away in discomfort. "This is outrageous slander," he bellowed again. Who in their right mind would believe a floor cleaner over one of Africa's top businessmen? Zola didn't respond. She turned instead to the elderly woman who had applauded and gave her a graceful bow. "Thank you, Madame Fanza. My mother spoke of you often. And she was always a woman of honor," the older woman replied, her voice trembling. "We once promised to stand by each other on the board, but I stayed silent too long." Another shareholder, Mr. Tembo, rose from his seat. "If these documents are genuine, then Chibwe didn't just deceive Mrs. Winta. He deceived all of us." Chibwe let out a dry, broken laugh, one that echoed like a cracked bell. "You really believe a few photos and the words of a no-name girl can bring me down?" Just then, a young man stepped forward from the back of the room. He was a lawyer with the Shareholder Rights Committee, holding up a sealed folder. "We've received a full copy of the evidence from Ms. Zola, and on behalf of the committee, I formally request an independent investigation into the company's internal affairs over the past 2 decades. Zola stepped forward again, eyes locked ahead. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came to restore my mother's name, and to speak for everyone who's ever been deceived by a man who hides truth behind power." The murmurs slowly faded. The MC hesitated, then asked, "Do we wish to see more evidence?" Zola nodded. The screen lit up again. This time, it played an internal meeting recording from 2003. Chibwe's voice was unmistakable as he spoke to his personal lawyer. "If she doesn't resign, I'll fabricate a story. Push her out no matter the cost. This company is mine. I won't share it with anyone." The hall was struck silent, as though lightning had torn through the ceiling. Some of the women shareholders dabbed their eyes with tissues. An elderly man, Mr. Mosi, once the company's CFO, staggered to his feet, his face pale. "I signed that year's financial reports. I had no idea this was the truth." Zola turned to him, voice gentle but firm. "You can make it right, by standing on the side of truth today." Mr. Mosi slowly faced the board and declared, "I motion for the immediate suspension of Mr. Chibwe's leadership pending full investigation." Zola bowed her head in gratitude, her eyes glistening. She had never imagined this day would come. But today, in the very room where ruthless decisions were once made, the truth had risen, and a daughter had stood as a hero. An independent investigation was launched immediately after the gala. Over a dozen journalists filed urgent interview requests, and the major shareholders convened an emergency board meeting the very next morning. For the first time in 2 decades, the chairman's seat at Mwansa Group was on the verge of collapse. Zola was invited to attend, not as an outsider, but as a key witness and internal petitioner. In a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the skyline of Lusaka, she now sat face-to-face with the same powerful individuals who once mocked her. Chibwe occupied the center seat, but the arrogance was gone from his expression. He looked at Zola with burning resentment, but there was nothing he could do to stop what was unfolding. Attorney Diana Tembo, representing shareholder rights, read aloud the full investigative report. Forged fingerprints. Suspicious offshore payments. Illegally transferred shares to shell corporations. One by one, the findings were revealed. Zola remained silent throughout, nodding quietly when asked to confirm. Midway through the meeting, board member Mr. Sitali stood up. "I move for an immediate vote. Based on the evidence, We must suspend Mr. Chibwe from the position of chairman pending judicial review. The vote was held under palpable tension. Final count: 8 in favor, 2 abstentions, 1 against. Chibwe stood slowly, his face dark and defeated. He left the room in silence, not the silence of power, but the silence of a fall. Zola did not shed a tear. She rose, bowed respectfully to the board, and was formally invited to serve as interim acting director, a first step toward transparent transition. Outside, the media had gathered in force. As Zola stepped through the doors, the crowd erupted with applause and flashing cameras. "Do you have a message for the public?" a reporter asked. Zola smiled, her voice calm and steady. "Never underestimate those who work in silence. Sometimes, they carry the strength to change history." 3 months after that fateful board meeting, Zola was officially appointed CEO of Mwanza Group in a solemn, landmark ceremony. Media from across the country flocked to Lusaka, not just to witness a historic transfer of power, but to hear the woman who was once a janitor unveil her bold new vision: rebuilding for the people. Zola began her tenure by launching a full audit of abandoned projects, slashing excessive executive bonuses, and redirecting funds toward healthcare and education in underprivileged regions. She established the Winta Foundation, named after her mother, to support women who had been silenced or marginalized in the financial and corporate sectors. Soon after, a rural hospital in Eastern Province was built using funds from the foundation. Zola personally attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Locals lined the streets, cheering. Some cried as they touched an ambulance for the first time in their lives. Zola left the event with mud on her gown but a radiant smile on her face. This is what real investment looks like. She also founded the Winta Leadership Institute in Kabwe, her childhood hometown. The academy trains young women in leadership, technology, and sustainable management. At the opening ceremony, Zola stood silently in front of a hand-painted portrait of her mother, eyes red with emotion. At her former high school, Zola spoke to hundreds of students. "You don't need to be born wealthy to make a difference. All you need is wisdom, grit, and a belief no one can extinguish." That quote went viral across social media, igniting hope in thousands of young people across the continent. Under Zola's leadership, the company's profits didn't decline. They grew, steadily and sustainably. International investors admired how she balanced financial returns with social responsibility. 1 year later, at the African Economic Summit, Zola was named History Maker of the Year. But when she stepped onto the stage to accept the award, she didn't speak of achievements. She spoke of compassion. "I stand here today not because of luck, but because of a woman who believed truth could survive any lie, my mother, and because of those who had the courage to look back and to stand for justice." After the ceremony, sitting alone in her office as golden sunlight streamed through the window, Zola opened an old journal, her mother's. The final page bore a handwritten message: "If you are reading this, then the truth has won." Later, a young assistant asked if she'd like to move into the executive suite on the top floor. Zola smiled and replied, "No, I'll keep the small room near the storage closet, the one I used to mop. I never want to forget where I came from." What began as a cruel joke at a lavish party became the rewriting of history, not by inherited power, but by integrity, courage, and an unshakable belief in justice. And so, the girl who was once underestimated became an uncrowned queen, beloved by the people, and etched into history. If you were moved by this story, please like and subscribe to support more extraordinary journeys like Zola's. Every click fuels our mission to bring you real, powerful stories of resilience and hope.